has become the longest war in American history, a war that has yet to be won.
This is one area where we cannot have budget cuts.
The war goes beyond law enforcement. Treatment programs, banned under the first drug laws of the century, are reinstated.
Acid, baby, the stuff dreams are made of.
LSD, like its predecessors, goes underground.
What happened was it lost its public image, so that you didn't see it in the newspapers. It didn't light up the television screens. So the dramatic change had to do with the public attention, much more so than the levels of use. It's never gone away. It's been a mainstay of the youth drug scene since the late 1960s, and it is today.
Illegal drugs have been likened to weeds. They're never completely eradicated. At the start of a new century, new drugs appear, never before seen, that pose yet another threat to a generation of kids on the brink of adulthood.
Hands above your head! Hands above your heads! Put your hands on top of your head.
Nixon's plan to stamp out illegal drugs initiates a prohibition based on the belief that no one has a right to take a drug proven or perceived to be dangerous.
You'll not be hurt, just cooperate, okay?
The constitutional right to pursue chemical happiness, in place a century before, has vanished.
I'm going to search you. Carrying any weapons? No, sir. Okay.
Yet what the government does to protect its own citizens is often criticized.
Spread your legs out a little.
If you sum it up and you look at the drug war, number one, it hasn't reduced the production of drugs in the source countries. And number two, even if it did, the synthetic drugs that are made here are just as dangerous. We would still have a similar drug problem. Number three, 90% of the drugs come into the country undetected because of the vast trade that we have. And it hasn't stopped drug use and drug selling.
It has been a disaster even worse than alcohol prohibition. What it's done to the criminal justice system is indescribable. Half the people, more than half the people in federal prison are there for drug offenses.
Where's he gonna go?
We're arresting 500,000 people a year for possessing marijuana. We're locking up kids, sometimes for life, for their first drug offense. We have no room in our prisons for rapists and child molesters and murderers because we're filling them up with these non-violent drug offenders.
While the war against drugs is a burden and expense that some critics question, everyone agrees something must be done.
But first of all, the supplemental that we're considering today is about our children and whether we want our children to grow up in a society free from the scourge of drugs.
Meanwhile, for a new generation of sophisticated national and international drug traffickers, it's business as usual. They make untold billions selling drugs, which tempt adolescents and adults every day, despite the best efforts of law enforcement to stop them.
This is solely a way of making money and looking at the young people in the United States as the guinea pigs to make the money from. These organizations are committed to bring drugs in the country, and we have to be just as committed, not only in law enforcement, but as a society. You know, we're working with parents, we're working with teachers, working with educators to get that message out, that drugs are bad.
To make matters worse, some of the new synthetic drugs are potentially more dangerous than their predecessors. In light of this danger, many have been added to the schedules of federally controlled substances. Among them, ketamine, or Special K, a powerful veterinary tranquilizer, and gamma-hydroxybutyrate, or GHB. GHB, a workout tonic used by bodybuilders, finds its way into clubs as a dangerous pastime. It's easy to make, and for law enforcement, hard to detect. It looks like water and is sold in containers that disguise its danger.
The primary ingredients are paint stripper, floor stripper, degreasing solvents. My reaction to it was, my God, this is the most dangerous drug I've encountered in 25 years as a cop. And I say that with all my heart. You can die very simply by just forgetting to breathe. You can die from pulmonary edema, which is left heart valve failure, and you literally froth blood through the nose and you drown in your own vomit. You can die face down in a pillow because you're only breathing 6 times a minute. If you're sitting in a bathtub and you hit a GHB coma, it's called carpeting out, you just slide down into the water and drown without even a whimper.
Like opium in the 18th and 19th century, GHB has been used to rob and even rape unsuspecting victims.
Because it induced the comatose state and a stupor state, people started giving it to strangers and then abused them and misused them. So it became a drug that you use to make a person vulnerable to your advances and unable to resist your advances.
It's a nightmare for prosecution, and it's a nightmare for drug detection. This drug is only in the system a very short time. And we're seeing a lot of young people's lives ripped apart, or people of all ages, by drug-facilitated rapes, GHB being one of the ultimate nightmares.
The use of illegal drugs, whether heroin in 1920, cocaine in 1970, or ecstasy in 2000, share a common history. The more the user increases the dosage or uses drugs that are impure or too strong, the more apparent the dangers become.
There is no such thing as good drugs and bad drugs. All drugs are essentially poisons. Some poisons have a short-term beneficial effect. It's the dose that you take that depends on the effect it creates on you. You take a little bit and it's a stimulant. You take more of it and it is a depressant or has a sedative effect. You take even more, almost any drug, if you take enough of it, will kill you. You squeeze a couple bottles of aspirin down into one tablet and take that tablet and it'll kill you. And yet one of them will simply cure a headache.
Drugs don't change anything but the relationship between chemicals already in the body. Yet Americans seem to attribute magical powers to drugs, whether they're used to cure a headache, rid the mind of psychic pain, or induce spiritual enlightenment.
Drugs are often taken or advocated as shortcuts to something we all want, but we need this help to get to it. During the time of drug toleration and enthusiasm for drugs, the thought is, if you're careful and you use it just right, the drugs can make you more than you would be just by yourself. There is a physiological naivete about drugs that were going to do one wonderful thing but have no other side effects. When we turn against drugs, the opposite attitude is the one we hold, which is any drug you take reduces your potential. The story of these drug episodes, these waves of drug use, basically is the story of how the naivete changes into practical experience with drugs.
Some say drugs haven't changed, but over time, our attitude towards them has.
10 times. Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children.
Every president since 1970 has found that the basic human need to use illegal drugs doesn't go away, no matter what the government does.
Said no to drugs. The scourge of drugs must be stopped.
As long as there is a demand, there will be a supply.
$1 billion.
Unless humankind comes up with a cure for the need to escape what is, most of us are bound to ride the wave of desire for a different reality. The question is, can we do it responsibly?